For a long time, I've always been interested in bells that aren't ringing. I'm actually more interested in bells that are silent than ringing.
Hi, everybody. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're listening to Vibrations Matter. I talk to artists, scientists, and everybody who's interested in light, sound, and frequencies. Join me. Welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, to spend a little time to rewind our film that literally started, I think, in 2017 when you visited and we went to see the anechoic chamber with Dr. Putterman. And then you came a couple more times. The pandemic happened. We were online a lot, starting to work on the Getty project. And I remember very clearly you telling me about how you were in San Francisco Bay meditating and thinking about the fire in Notre Dame and how much you would love to do something with that. And your persistence is just really something I admire because I've watched it in action. The persistence of vision, the persistence of allowing things to happen, but also to push it to happen. So I would love to have our audience get a little background of what it took to make this happen and how you went about it and how that even vision came along. And from the Notre Dame bells to, the caves in Austria. So give us a little bit of a process behind the scenes. I think a lot of people really appreciate that.
Well, the idea with the Notre Dame piece came about because I've had a longstanding interest in the sound of silence, and particularly when I lived lived in Japan in the mid 1980s. I had the I spent a lot of time in Kyoto visiting Buddhist temples and started making recordings of large hanging Buddhist temple bells, the sounds they make when they're not ringing in the normal sense, and the fact that they were kind of secretly vibrating and ringing all the time, and it related to me very much in the Zen idea of the sound of one hand clapping, and that interest stayed with me, and the idea of physical reality as a as listening, and and is and that everything is kind of connected through the mode of vibration is an idea that's intrigued me for a long time. I did, 18 years ago, I did a excuse me, big installation in the turbine holotate modern that involved mounting a network of vibration sensors on the Millennium Bridge and turning the Millennium Bridge not only into a live listening device, but also as a live musical instrument, and giving it a voice like that. And I'm currently negotiating doing a project in China, in Beijing, that uh, may explore a dimension of that. But when I saw the images of Notre Dame's fire in April 2019 and saw that the bell towers had survived the fire, I started reaching out to a network I'd had in Paris with really related to an old project I'd done 30 years ago in the summer of '94, for the 50th anniversary of D-Day, where I brought the live sound of the Normandy coast, to the facade of the Arc de Triomphe, wrapped it in the sound of the sea. For that. But a number of the people in the Ministry of Culture who were part of that undertaking were still around in Paris in the Ministry of Culture, and it was like a game of chess, and 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 I was in playing this administrative game. I was finally connected to a person who in 2019, 2020 was the director general of the government organization restoring Notre Dame. She was a former museum director. She'd been involved in the creation of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and she had a pretty open mind. And
Mhm.
your in Paris was one of my big advocates for the idea, and so I was successful in being able to do this.
But wait, take us back to the idea. Take us back to the Notre Dame fire and the significance of that, and the significance of that as a symbol. Uh, Notre Dame is like an amazing edifice. It's meaningful. It's literally the heart of Paris. And here you are in the pandemic in San Francisco. Of course, there's the memory of the Kyoto bells, and that brings it up. But take us a little further into
Well,
your
well, well
process.
I've always, I mean, for a long time, I've always been interested in bells that aren't ringing. I'm actually more interested in bells that are silent than in the normal sense. And I had in 2015, I had was researching doing a public art project in New York City with the Met Life Tower bells, which no for 100 years had been ringing Westminster chimes. They stopped ringing those because that the MetLife Tower was purchased and turned into a luxury hotel. So they stopped ring, ring,
God, that
ringing.
says a lot. End of an era, that's for sure.
So, so I was negotiating with the Madison Square Park Conservancy about trying to do a project, with those bells, and spent a lot of time making accelerometer recordings of those bells. And
Hold on, hold on. I'll stop you there again. There's probably a lot of people in our audience who don't know what an accelerometer is. Maybe you can explain that a
an
little bit.
accelerometer is a vibration sensor that is normally a tool used by structural engineers to measure vibration. And for me, it's like a spaceship because any structure, anything I see with my eyes, if I put an accelerometer on it, it takes me inside the vibrations going on in that. And the most interesting part of that is that everything you see in the physical world is listening to everything that's going on around you in the air.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I, uh, I was very lucky in the research I did with the Life Tower in 2015 because a good friend of mine worked for Air Acoustics and he helped me making these test recordings of the Met Life Tower. Then a little bit later on, the Elizabeth Tower in London, which is the bell tower that houses the bells of Big Ben, was closed
Mm-hmm.
for restoration. I mean, and they were, and which meant that the bells of Big Ben had become silent. And I got interested in the idea, and I was negotiating with the BBC and trying the Palace of Westminster to do a live sound piece about with the silent sounds of Big Ben's bells. And I was trying to do this as a kind of BBC radio project. The Palace of Westminster wasn't interested in this because they did not really like the idea of celebrating the fact that these bells weren't ringing. And but in 2020, I had this big exhibition in the Kunsthaus Graz in Austria, and one of the people who went to this exhibition was a woman who lived in Paris, whose parents were Austrian, and she reached out to me on Instagram actually, and and about the piece in Austria, and we started a dialogue, and we had a couple of Zoom meetings, and I told her about what I was trying to do with Big Ben in London, and then she said to me, I remember this conversation. She said, "Forget Big Ben. The most interesting silent bells in the world are right here in Paris."
Mm-hmm.
So that then, I decided to put Big Ben aside and started to focus on doing this. And what I wanted to do was do an artwork and that would reveal that Notre Dame's bells are secretly ringing all the time, like a living voice, in that shutdown cathedral. And I was very lucky that through my uh, con- connections, I was able to involve IRCOM to really endorse the project and Central Pompidou to exhibit it.
So you traveled there to go inside of the Notre Dame, didn't you?
The first site visit I made to Notre Dame was in July of 2021. I was
Mhm.
invited by the woman in charge of the restoration, whose name is Anne Minnie Horn. She invited me to come to Paris to present my ideas to a committee and to visit the Notre Dame work site. And that gave me the opportunity to make my first recordings of some of Notre Dame's bells not ringing. And I remember the first bell I recorded at Notre Dame was the oldest and most important of the bells, called Emmanuel, which is in, which is in the South Tower.
Mhm.
And then once I had once that door had opened, uh, it took about it. It took this is summer of 2021. By the spring of 2022, I had a contract from the French government, a cultural partnership agreement, and the project, and I had the permission to do the project. I had negotiated with a French telecommunications company called Orange to provide a fiber optic network connecting the bells towers of Notre Dame to IRCOM. And so, by the early spring of 2022, the project was in production mode and scheduled to open in June of 2022.
Didn't we have a live feed to the French residence,
Yeah,
the French ambassador's residence?
I did after the project had opened in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited by the cultural attaché of the French
Yes.
Embassy in Los Angeles to make a presentation at this amazing residence building they had in Beverly Hills. And,
That was quite a scene, I have to say.
and one of the things I remember, the building on that residence was this kind of guest house in the garden.
Uh-huh.
In the garden in front of the guest house, there was a couple, one or two beautiful French women who were
Pole
involved,
dancing. They
were
were
pole
pole
dancing.
dancing.
They
I
were
know.
pole dancing.
It was the most bizarre thing. Like, going to listen to the Notre Dame bells, and we were coming in because we were actually co-hosting it, and oh my goodness, what, like, how I could not, it was definitely a dissonant moment.
Yeah, but then I remember after doing this at, at the French cultural place in Beverly Hills, I did one in New York in Villa Albertine, which is
Uh-huh.
this cultural center that's on Fifth Avenue across from the Met. And the French guy who was organizing it, apologized to me. He said, "I'm sorry, we don't have pole dancers."
Did you forgive him?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so you had the bells going, and then Ars Electronica came into the picture.
But it was exhibit presented live at Ars Electronica in September of 2022, and it was installed in a garden space on a university
Mm-hmm.
campus. And the way that this thing that we just did with Notre Dame and the melting glacier came about because Ars Electronica had reached out to me to find out if I would consider the possibility of basically bringing the Notre Dame piece into a giant ice cave in the Alps.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And of course, you said
of
yes.
course I said yes. And
Especially thinking in terms of climate disruption and what we've been talking about throughout. And as an aside to this, we'll get back to the cave in a minute. I just wanted to share with the audience the discovery that the site that you were really intent on was the Royce Hall Towers, which is kind of the center of campus, similar to Notre Dame being the center of Paris. The Royce Hall is really the center of UCLA. And I started with this long email thread, dean's office, the facilities, Royce Hall, etc., to find out how we can get permission to get inside the bell tower. Because this was really important for obvious reasons. And after this long, long thread, Otter, even, who's I think the manager there of pretty much everything, writes, there are no bells in the Royce Tower. And I remember.
And that was the whole point of wanting to do it.
Exactly. And it was just, I remember you and I laughing so hard because we kept thinking that you're going to go up there and record the silent bells, but they were non-existent. So, and apparently the recording doesn't even come from the Royce Towers, but from the opposite, the library.
Right.
And the library doesn't have bells either. It's also a recording. So it was an interesting exercise to see how much bureaucracy is involved in dealing with these buildings and these bells that are often just not part of our daily thinking. They're kind of there, but we don't really give them too much time anymore. And I'm sure with your talking to different foundations, institutes, consulates, it also gets so involved to just go in there and record it and play it.
Well, I feel very fortunate, happy, and lucky that this all worked.
It all worked, and it worked truly against all odds because when we finally got permission to go in, and you and I actually went up into the towers and we're looking around and checking things and get an approval, we did amazingly. Then the protests happened.
Originally, we wanted to put loudspeakers actually up in the bell chambers.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. So it was going to be from the bell towers. But then the protests happened right in front, of course, in the center of everything. And they were quite brutal and quite intense. We're still not quite recovered from them, I have to say. So then we were really wondering if this was going to happen at all, because it was set as it opened in September. The protests were in June. We really thought, is there a way to get this approved after such a charged atmosphere happened here? And again, by some magic it did, but what I really appreciated when you were introducing the piece that now included also these caves, which you'll bring in a second, you were talking about this sound actually being healing, the healing sound, and the primary concern that we all should have is the climate change and what that's doing to us. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit, how it evolved.
Well, I felt with the Notre Dame piece, it was I had revealed made an artwork out of one of the most important historical voices in Europe, uh, and because it was a live voice, it wasn't originally a recording, and it was really speaking to this issue of climate change and the idea of putting it in this giant cave in the Alps, where when you go into it, it looks like you have all these ice sculptures that were actually created over hundreds of years by a melting glacier that's sitting on top of this mountain made of limestone. And 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 and, dur- and when it opened a month ago, at the beginning of September during Ars Electronica, the opening event was actually in the ice cave. And Earcom had set up a multi-channel loudspeaker system in the cave, and and hearing this live mix between the bells of Notre Dame and the live sounds of this rapidly melting glacier in the cave was like
Incredible,
was
incredible.
incredible. And then, it opened the next day in Ars Electronica in Linz, where
Mm-hmm.
where it was where it opened at midnight on the 3rd of September in this giant cathedral, the main cathedral in Linz.
Wow.
And then it went to a museum in Graz, Princess Graz, where the the exterior of that unusually shaped building has an LED lighting system where you can actually play videos on the LED system, and they put the video of the melting glacier on the exterior of the Princess
Hmm.
Graz in Vienna. And now it's at UCLA, it's supposed to go to Prague uh, at a festival. It's called the Signal Festival in Prague.
Are you thinking of bringing it out to Asia too? Because now you're
Well,
planning it.
I'm negotiating with the people in Beijing,
Right, right.
because it's supposed to be part of this this big exhibition that's opening in a museum on the outskirts of Beijing. And I had a Zoom meeting actually last evening
Mm.
about that. So that's a possibility. Although I think they're probably more interested in my doing something maybe with a bell tower, one or two bell towers in the Beijing area.
Maybe you could do something with the Yellow River at the same time. Since it seems to be fire and water, right? I mean, it's definitely these two elements.
I love the newspaper article that talked about it as fire and ice.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's what it is,
Yeah.
really,
And
which
I
is
don't know
pretty
if you've
amazing.
seen this in the New York Times either yesterday or today. There was an article about the largest melting glacier in Europe, which is on the Matterhorn mountain on the border of Switzerland and Italy. And that glacier is melting so rapidly that it's causing that
Floods.
that Italy and Switzerland are negotiating a new border.
No. This is solution to any of our climate problems.
Yeah.
Whether it's a virus or whether it's floods or fires, let's make a border.
Well, a new one. They want to redefine the Italian Swiss border. But there's an article in
So
the Times
crazy.
about
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, yeah. So where are you feeling about this now? In a way, it's a completed project. It started literally 7 years ago from when we met. This kind of process.
Well,
Uh,
I don't see it as completed. I sort of still see it as still
Still in process.
it's still a kind of beginning because the, the issues that we're talking about in the project are not resolved, and all we're doing is maybe giving these issues a voice and an audience maybe that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
But I feel that with the idea of melting glaciers, what I would really like to do is a much bigger project on a global scale, and
Mm-hmm.
really giving a live voice not only to the single melting glacier in the Alps,
Right, right.
but uh, melting glaciers at many different points, you know, on the planet.
So this brings up maybe the last question I'll ask you, which I have been asking myself. My own work has been very much focused also on pointing to the climate change and the disasters that could possibly be averted. And then with this project, Atmosphere of Sound, that Anuradha and I have been working on for going on 5 years now, we were really focusing and researching on artists working with these issues and through sound in particular. And I'm starting to ask myself if we're making any difference at all, because things are just getting worse, and scientists have been raising the red flag since the 70s. And artists, Newton Harrison, for instance, have been working on this also since then. And more artists are pointing to it, but the situation is just getting worse. And so, do you really think that we can make a difference, or are we just basically expressing what's going on?
Well, I think we can make a difference if we have the opportunity to do it on a scale that has is a global scale, so that we're not doing this in in like in in a more in a kind of isolated art context.
Right, right.
I mean, I think it was great that I could do this at Ars Electronica, but Ars Electronica has a very limited audience, and it's great that we can do this at UCLA, but it's also relatively, if you compare it to the global scale, it's a small
And
thing.
then it's, in the end, kind of preaching to the converted, and even those who happen to walk in uh, may just understand it as an aesthetic experience or a
Yeah.
nice kind of sound
Well,
environment.
I mean, what I would really like to do is if it were possible to do do a project like this on on a on a global scale, so that simultaneously in major communica- communication centers you could have a, a live sound and possibly video thing where you are experiencing the voices of all these melting glaciers at the same time. Or another possibility is excuse me, I had done a recording project in California with giant sequoia trees. And I
Hmm.
also thought it would be interesting to do a global project, simultaneously listening to trees in a whole bunch of old growth forests. But I think it needs a sense of scale to really make 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 a difference. And so it would just be incredible to have like a a 1 day live global thing in major museums and public spaces in major venues all around the planet. That would be the way to really make a difference.
In the sense that people would hear this, and then what?
Well, it would also get the right kind of publicity, if you could do it that way.
But how would that stop the fossil fuel or
Well,
the
it
tree
would
logging industries?
it would it would it would influence the people who make decisions that regulate these industries to be
Hmm.
more motivated.
Hmm.
And it would light a fire under these bureaucrats and politicians.
Yes, yes. Well, let's hope. Let's end on that very hopeful note, that we can actually organize a number of artists, not just yourself, but many artists from all around the world, and do global events, not just for 1 day, but daily, so that consciousness is raised progressively, and those people who are actually making the decisions, of course. So your work is really admired by so many, and this particular piece and my journey on watching you go through the whole process has been just wonderful. I really appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
Well, it's so great to have a friendship with you, Victoria, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you.
Absolutely. Vibrations matter.
Yeah. Well, as as a famous Sufi mystic once said, vibration is at the root of the whole of creation.
Absolutely. And nanoscience will say it's totally true. All
Yeah,
right. Take care.
yeah. Take care. Thank you.
Bye, Bill.
Bye.